So here we are again. I really hoped I didn't have to dig back into this thing because it was a little annoying the last time I went through it. But unfortunately, I have no choice in the matter. So if you watched my video on the Dana Speedostat cruise control, you might recognize this part right here. This is the vacuum actuator which tugs on the throttle linkage using this bathtub cable. It's an interesting piece of hardware. It's a very old piece of hardware as well. I can find instances of this design being used through the 1980s into the early 1990s before more servo-driven cruise controls began to replace this. But what's happened to this one is that the chain's been pulled out. To better explain how this works, this area right here is just a giant rubber bellows. And on the top here, we have a pair of valves. One valve for your vacuum in port, and another valve which goes to your vent line as well. The vent line itself is actually part of the braking assembly, the brake pedal. In my case, it's yet even more bathtub chain and an electrical interlock switch. The idea here is that, sure, you don't need much vacuum to collapse the bellows. But in the event that you have to brake for whatever reason, we don't want a restricted nozzle preventing the throttle from being let off. So there's a significantly larger hose that goes underneath, and when you open that valve, it electrically turns off the solenoid, so this begins to vent, and as much of the vacuum as possible is broken through this hose. But when that happens, this should pull itself almost completely in, and it doesn't. What happened, from what I can tell, is that a shop that was working on my car, I had the engine rebuilt, but I decided to shop out the removal and reinstallation to another, shop. And they forgot to disconnect this from the throttle linkage. I was expecting the bathtub chain to break before the steel wire here. But alas, what has actually happened is this is a potentiometer here. I don't know the range for it because it's not on there. There are part numbers, but they don't tell you anything at all. There is this wire here, which leads around it and then is grabbed by the bellows. And what's happened here, first off, there's been so much force, like it's been pulled on so hard, that the crimp I had on the end of this, because I've had this break once before, that got pulled off, and that has fallen somewhere inside of here, which is frustrating. And the other thing is that the potentiometer isn't really much of a potentiometer anymore. For that there, I'm going to take a screwdriver and we will take that potentiometer off of here. There we go. And there is a spring here. And I will take our wire out. For the sake of myself, I will remember this is how it goes in. Okay, where did I put that ohmmeter? There's that multimeter, that'll do. So, I've been in here once before, like I said, because this cable here has broken once before on me. And so I just made another one using a spare. We'll get to that. I was lucky at that time, and I remembered what the calibration adjustment was on this potentiometer before I removed it. Hence why you may have seen there was a red mark here, and right there, and another red mark that's right there, so it always matched up. And for me, it's at least 724 ohms. So we know that at rest, this would be 724 ohms. Well, I'm in the 2K position right now. Oh, I see 1.9. So there's 1.9, and if I turn it, I should have a nice... Okay, so there's the far end there, and that's 1.9, and if I turn it this direction, it just disappears. Oh, no, there it is again. So that's already a bad sign that the potentiometer internally has been damaged. And it's down at 0.6. And there's a chunky spot right there, and I can feel it. Okay. The point I'm trying to get to here is that they broke my cruise control. The potentiometer does have this custom little pulley that's pressed onto it. I do wish you the best of luck trying to find something like that. I mentioned it to them. I took it back on warranty. They did some other warranty repairs, but when it came to this, they didn't even want to talk about it. Thanks. Thankfully, on the other hand, I was aware that something bad might happen to the cruise control eventually. So I kept my eye out for a replacement. And the good news is, this is not an uncommon or like an AMC specific part. Various vendors were using it. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Cadillac, even like Volvo and Nissan were using these actuators. So it was just re-OEM'd by a bunch of different companies. This one here, in fact, was sold by the dealership and was more than likely the off-the-shelf model from like a Kmart. And yet the AMC one is just about exactly the same. So I'm actually going to take this away. And here's an AMC one. And as you may notice, it is basically identical. And it has the same potentiometer inside of it. So this could very well also be a bad one as well. So it makes sense to test it. Well, how do I test this on the bench? Well, the first thing we're going to do here is I will take this bracket off. On my vehicle, there's a weird little L-shaped bracket which bolts on right here and holds it to the firewall above the throttle linkage. AMC has this bracket here which mounts it above your brake regulator on the passenger side, and there's actually a rigid shaft and an extra cable which goes and screws here and runs across the engine bay. And that connects into the throttle linkage as well. I could, in theory, use that. But I kind of want to keep this stock as it rolled off the dealership. This should work, but let's try and make it back to the dealership optioned version first. So I will take that bracket off. Actually, I'll put that nut back on it so I won't lose it. Move the bracket over there. And I'm just using a Torx screwdriver. And this is good information also if you're rebuilding one of these, because you cannot get them new now. Make no mistake. There were lots of them made. You may find new old stock, but chances are you're going to be doing used holes. There we go. So that comes off. That's just a piece of metal, and it's kind of a protector, because underneath here we have this piece of foam, which is it's just basically a piece of foam that's perished, and that's just acting like a filter for the port right here, which allows the system to vent normally. On this side over here, this is where the vacuum comes in. This is also, you notice how it's super loose here. I'm pulling this off because there's an O-ring that hides in there. And if you have vacuum leaks that are happening somewhere in this general area, this is where you may want to check first. Don't glue it on, but that may very be your problem if you have that O-ring that's gone bad. But as I mentioned before, this thing here will give, it will not operate with no power. The cruise control has to be set as part of its safety systems before the bellows will begin to collapse under the load of the vacuum. So I can see here, this is our inlet. That's always open. This one here is closed when it's not operating. And this one's open. And that reverses. And it'll modulate the two depending on how much acceleration or deceleration it needs to regulate its speed. But in this case here, yeah, this is closed. So we want the orange and white wires. I will apply a 12-volt source to that. That's just a ground that goes across both of them. So if I ground that, and in theory, you should be able to hear this, is that when I operate this, there'll be a click. And when I operate this one, there'll be a click. And what I'm going to do here is I will take the orange and white wires. So orange was ground. And the white is our positive. I'm just going to disconnect over at my bench supply here so I can do this. Okay, and I will get some of my tools out of here so I can do this experiment. I will grab the multimeter. See if I can put that just on the edge of our view there. Might be a little bit fuzzy, but we'll work with that. Still on 2,000 ohms. And there we go. So we are at 0.406. And where did I put it? There it is. So I have this thing called the Mighty Vac. This is a fantastic tool that everyone working with older vehicles should own, and it's just a handheld vacuum pump with a vacuum gauge and a release. This one here, the Mighty Vacs, are made of plastic. They're cheaper. They're still pretty good. They come with a fairly decent accessory kit, so I do trust this one. I can't say I swear by it just because it's plastic, but close enough. So as it stands, I can just put that on there. And because the vent is currently open, I can try and apply a vacuum, and nothing's happening. No, nothing's happening at all. So now what I'll do is I will apply power, which will close this vent. And as I start applying a vacuum, you should see this pull cable here begin to draw itself inwards as the bellows collapses. And we should see the resistance increase on here. And I just want to see that the full range of operation on this potentiometer is without any interruptions or breaks or anything we saw before where like the resistance was weird and then it went really low and there was like open spots in the middle. We don't want that. And with used parts, we don't know how much the cruise control was used. So I'm going to apply power. It's now applied. So we are 0.408 or 408 ohms. Apply a bit of vacuum and we can see it's already going up. And it's pulling in the actuator. $1,700. And we just rolled over, so I'll go up to 20,000 ohms, 2,000 ohms. It's still looking really good. Yeah, this looks good. 3.5. Are we near the end? We are almost near the end. I want to see where it hits the end stop on the potentiometer. For 4K. Oh, and we hit the end stop right there. And you probably saw the vacuum picked up a little bit there as well. Let me see if I can do it again. right there. So like at 4.404K, we're hitting the end stop on the potentiometer. And if I back this off, yeah, looks good. Okay, so I have a replacement, which should do me good. I'm going to just add a bit of water here to my sponge. And I will begin warming up my iron. Bring it to about 620 degrees. This is absolutely leaded solder we're going to be using here. Now, I think the other question here is, could this be the case of someone stomped on the gas pedal too hard and that pulled on this and caused that to break? The answer to that one is no, because the way the cruise control works, yet again, when you step on the accelerator, you're actually slacking your bathtub chain. This here, and when this is on its full length of travel, your gas pedal in the car is sitting at its idle position. Under no circumstances should this be tight, because then that means that this here can be holding your idle oh so slightly open. So there are adjustments throughout, one of which is that the way it's mounted on mine, you just simply take the nut off and add a washer to add about a 1/16 of an inch. So I will take that off. I will take that off. I could, in theory, reuse the one that's here right now, but I know the other one is working, so I'm just going to steal the potentiometer off of it. And we'll also be stealing the wire off of this as well. So that may require me again to be adding washers and shims to this. I need to remember that spring. Oh, I forgot I had that plugged in still. Good thing I had that set down to 200 milliamps. So that should just walk out somehow. There we go. Okay. I'm going to make a mental note for myself here. It doesn't matter. It's a resistor. But just in case it does, this side is black, or the black wire. And now, without using my handy hands, let's warm up this solder, and off that comes. And off that comes. Okay. You've done me good for now. I'm going to hold on to you, however, because you still have good solenoids, and you currently still have good bellows, and you're not a cracked housing as well either. So, you're going into the parts bin. Now we come back to this one. I'm going to take a moment here just to verify that this all looks the same, and it isn't, apparently. Okay. Slightly different. We'll test this when we get to it. You can already see here. Okay, nope, actually we're good. Apply a bit of heat. And by the way, look, Mom, no flux. Okay, yeah, so. Yeah, if you got crunchy bits in the potentiometer, ooh, now it won't even turn all the way. So there is, I bet you there's stuff rattling around inside of that. Okay. And again, this is going to be a case of, look, Mom, no flux. Just going to add a little bit of fresh solder. I'm going to have to do this one-handed. This is going to be either a hilarious burn, or I'm going to pull this off without a hitch. Not with this brown wire getting in my way. Come on. Come on. You are going to give me grief. Okay, come on. Come on. And I'm sure, like, out there in the land of YouTube, there's someone screaming at me saying you're doing it wrong. I'm fully self-aware here. There. The moment. It's a good solid bond. Now the other side. Come on. There. And again, also, someone's going to say, why don't you take the solder out, loop it through the holes in here, and, you know, like, make it nice and solid. Well, we took it off without having to deal with any loops, so if it's been like that for 40 years already, it's going to be fine. Trust me here. Okay, so, whoops, let's not break it. So there's our spring. The spring needs to somehow, oh God, I have lost track where I was. Okay, where was this? So I think that's supposed, no, goes this way. Goes this way. Which means I believe this one goes through there. Alright, we'll deal with that. Okay, no, I think it does want me to go the other way. Okay, yeah, it wants me to go that way. I missed it. Come on. There we go. Okay, so it's in there. Springs seating in there. I do hope you saw that. I wasn't looking at the screen. I don't want to take it out again. And I will put in our set screw. If I can remember where I put my set screw. I believe that was it. No, it wants to go down to the lower one. Okay. It wants to go there. There is the old alignment mark right there. And I did notch this as well before. You didn't see that early on. Oh no, I prepared in front before I did a YouTube video. Okay, so I believe, yes, that wraps around that way. Where did I put my tweezers? Right there. Okay, no, it has to be on that side. Because there's little guides here. And so I'll bring that down. Can you see that? Do you see that? There. Little bit frustrated still. Can't believe I got burned by a garage like that. They trusted them too. Good. They were good guy there. Like, the actual mechanics, sure, I can understand if you forget a couple of things after 4 months of an engine waiting to be rebuilt. But just some of the stuff there, and the new management just seemed really arrogant. Didn't like it at all. Okay, so I'm just gonna pop that in. I'm going to pop that in? No, I'm not going to, apparently. Come on. This thing is just not being photogenic. Okay, this is going to require me to swear here a couple of times. One moment, please. Okay, some colorful words later. I do have it now engaged with the bellows, and that seems to now work. So, we know what the limits were on the last actuator. I know what the resistance was for this on this adjustment originally on this with the old potentiometer. And I want to set it back to that if possible, because one of the biggest pains I've found with the cruise control on this car is that to set it, you have to baseline it, and this involves two people, a straight stretch of road, not much traffic, and it's kind of frustrating. I really don't want to do it again. The cruise control system is now bolted up underneath the dash, so it would be a little bit of a nightmare for me to get it out again. So if I can avoid having to recalibrate it, we won't. Because this here, you know what? I never checked to see if the part numbers were the same. 55B783. This one's H, this one's G. 1137811. 137 plus 1378118 max 1978608. I can't tell if it's a date code or not. It seems similar enough, so maybe we can set the resistance here, and then we're going to do another range, and hopefully we'll be okay, and then I'll be able to start putting things back together again. Where did I put that? There we go. Okay, where did I... Alright, so I'll put one on there. And I'll put one on there. So right now we're reading 0.21. There. And I just kind of want to cycle it a few times to make sure we're good. Okay, so. All right, so there we go. And it should be 0.724. This will be interesting. Which way do I have to go here? Okay. So I'll loosen that a little bit. And I will bump it up. Oh God, we're almost at the end stop and it's no good. Okay, that's no good at all. So on the far end of the end stop there, we have traveled not far enough. Okay, so in this case here, we may not be able... Yeah, and go the other way here. It goes too far down. What happens if I go the other way? Yep, so that's no good. That's no good. So this is one of the annoying things. So this here would tell me I would have to calibrate it. Unless, of course, I go with this set screw up here, and I can persuade it into the hole above it, which is also for setting it. Now, if I go to the far end of that end stop, where do we go? I think that's a bit much. No, I don't like this. Compared to, like, for me to get it where it needs to be, it has to be at the far end stop way the heck up here. I'm not satisfied with that at all. But at the same time, well, John, you only have one replacement. So what are you supposed to do about this here? Well, not quite. I have one more replacement. This also came out of an Eagle. Exact same mechanism. And I think the adjustment on here might be a bit more what we're after. So if you can hold on, I'm going to save you having to tear these all apart again and transfer it over. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully I'm lucky. Okay, so several things were learned today. First off, I didn't end up having to desolder that. And second off, you're going to notice this number here. We're close. I've got this pretty darn close to being dialed in. And even just the slightest disturbances right now will flex it around. That's not a problem with the potentiometer. It's just my contacts here. But I've got it dialed in where when it's at its best point of at its lowest point of resistance, and when it's relaxed, it's 0.724. Like, I think it's just this one here. I'm pretty sure it's just a lousy contact. That's fine. We're within 10 ohms going either direction most of the time. The other thing I've discovered is that with these wheels here, we noticed before they were slightly different, but this actually comes off, which was handy because it meant that the original wheel that was on this broken one, I've now moved into here. The other thing I noticed is that this is one of the brand new, like, excellent condition wires here. And from the last time I broke this is one of the wires I built myself. And if you put them up to each other, you will notice one's a little bit shorter than the other, going both directions. And this is important because that's why I was having such weirdness with my resistances. So, instead of going with the brand new cable and having to require me to recalibrate it, remember how this cable here was initially broken? So, what I've done here is these are actually terminal connector ends, the crimps. I just clamp those on there super, super, super hard. Fold a little bit of the stainless steel wire this is made out over the top and then solder it. The solder does not bond to the stainless steel wire, but I want to make some sort of crimped mass that allows me to attach on either side, either to the cruise control chain linkage or to the little clip that's on the bellows there. So we've gotten that dealt with. I'm going to move this out of the way here. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way as well. And I want to test to make sure, after all that work is said and done, and before I put this into the vehicle, if it still works, or if I've broken it. So I will grab our vacuum pump again. So our range is currently setting at 0.724. Yeah. So yeah, 0.721. You saw 724 there very briefly. I will verify that the vents is open. And I always want to make sure of that because, again, safety device. Safety first here. So I will apply our power. We'll apply that. Does it click? It does. And it's not staying clipped on. Come on. Can you stay clipped together? There. And I heard that go click, so I'm going to leave that there. And we'll apply a vacuum. Off it goes. And I'm just checking to make sure that it's fairly linear. Because our initial resistance is slightly higher than it was in the other actuator, we should be above, well above 4K ohms on the end stop. There's our 4K. And do we go any further? We do. And there's our end stop, 4.34. So that is about correct. And if I back, and I'm just holding it there, so I know the bellows is good right now. The solenoid's holding the valve closed. The vacuum's being held in here. And I'm not seeing it back off. So if I and that's 0.72. We're within 3 ohms. It's perfect. Okay, so that should be a wrap on this repair. To wrap up what we've done in this video here is we had, let me unplug that solenoid. We had the cruise control actuator off of a Dana Speedostat, which was damaged, and the potentiometer was ruined on it. That potentiometer is vital, absolutely vital to the operation of the cruise control system. It basically monitors where the position of the throttle linkage is at any time. We replaced it. We repaired the wire that was originally on there because apparently the other replacements I had were too long. I have gone and set my potentiometer's base resistance back to pretty much exactly where it was on the old cruise control actuator. We've tested to make sure the solenoids were good. We've made sure that the resistance on the potentiometer is good and linear, and the maximum resistance is about where we should expect it. So I'm going to put the top back onto this. I'm going to put our chain back onto this, and I will install it into the car and go for a test drive. And if we're lucky, it should work. Okay, so I've taken myself outside of town a bit here, and I'm going to arm the cruise control by putting it in the middle position. I'm going to get myself to 60. I'm going to push the button, and hopefully it should take off. No foot on it. Yes! Does it accelerate? There was a pretty nasty misfire there. But it's doing it. And it cuts out. Excellent. And if I set it. Oh, yes! And if I tap the brake, it shuts it off. And if I do resume, and I can hear it, and it goes right back where I left it. We're fixed. How about it? So, I hope this was very informative to you. If you ever have to go and rebuild one of these cruise control actuators, it turns out there's a lot of parts on these things which are completely off the shelf compared to other similar models. And even if you have a Chrysler and you see one that looks familiar in a Ford, odds are it's exactly the same. And until next time, have a good drive.